Hello and welcome to today's NABS talk on the neuroscience of empowering leadership. My name is Isma Afridi. I head up the careers team at NABS, and I'm delighted that you've been able to join us here today. For those of you who aren't aware what NABS does, we're your support organisation. We're here to improve and champion your well-being as you journey through your career within advertising and media, and even more so now through this unprecedented time that we find ourselves in. We do this through a number of ways, through a dedicated and confidential advice line, coaching, masterclasses educating you on how to build resilience to pressure, through to educative and inspiring NABS talks such as the one that you're about to hear today. If you'd like to find out more about our services, please check out our website. Tonight's NABS talk is all about the neuroscience of empowering leadership. We all influence each other all the time, whether we're aware of it or not. Neuroscience has shown that our actions and emotions, even if suppressed, are very contagious and affect the mood, performance, and the well-being of individuals and teams. Thus, if we want to understand how we inspire each other most, we need to look at the brain research. In this talk, Dr. Gabija Toleikyte will explain what happens in the brains of leaders who focus on task execution, known as dissonant style. What happens in the brain of the teams under different styles of leadership, which leadership brings the best in people, and what stress does to the leadership and performance of the team. Dr. Gabija will also share some practical brain research tips on how to best inspire team members, and will share some useful methods on stress reduction at work. I'm delighted to be able to welcome Dr. Gabija Toleikyte, who's a neuroscientist and business coach.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Gabija Toleikyte. I'm a neuroscientist, and today I'll be talking to you about the neuroscience of empowering leadership. I have some slides which I'll share with you, but I will share my screen so you could see the slides when I'm actually talking in the real time. So in this seminar today, we'll discuss multiple aspects of leadership which are essential for understanding what's needed for us to stay well connected in the team and to actually bring performance, good performance and good well-being in the individuals within the team. In order to answer those questions, I'll firstly cover two different styles of leadership, and then we'll look what happens in the brains of leaders which exhibit those styles of leadership. Then we'll also look what these leaders bring in the brains of the team members and how does that affect performance and well-being of team members. Of course, later we'll look at what leadership is more effective and which of those two different leadership styles could empower people going through these times of uncertainty more. And last but not least, we'll discuss how stress, fear, and uncertainty affect the leadership styles. So to start with, let's think of leaders we know. It could be people you work with now or people you have worked with in the past. So I'll ask you to just kind of close your eyes and think for a moment of a person who truly, truly inspired you, a person who brought the best in you, perhaps a person who really managed to kind of bring the best qualities in you. So if you have a think of that person and try to imagine as vividly as you can. It can be somebody you work with now. It can be somebody you worked with in the past. It could be an informal leader, perhaps family member. It doesn't really matter what kinds of leader. Most importantly, that this person really made you feel that you were worth something. Now, if we open the eyes and we have a think, what qualities did this person possess? And I've done the seminar a number of times, and unfortunately I can't ask you in real time as we are pre-recording the session. But in the previous sessions, whenever I asked that, people usually came up with a list which kind of goes similarly to that. Usually those people who are really inspiring, People aren't, they really like people, they care about people, they want to understand, who are you? What is it that you care about? What things are important to you? There is true and genuine care. Also, they want to understand what is it that you're going through and what things are troubling you at the moment. They are both aware of other people's feelings, thoughts, talents, but also they are aware of their own situation and their own shortcomings. So in other words, they're kind of mindful of where they are, who they are, and who other people are. So they can actually, there is true understanding, curiosity, and knowledge about self and the team members, or, it doesn't have to be a formal team, about other people. And that brings a real compassion. In other words, when we actually see ourselves with our talents and shortcomings, our dreams and fears, and the other people, we see it in the same way. We actually see ourselves at the same plane as in this image. Person is standing in the circle with the team members. So we are in the equal plane. So that brings compassion and understanding. We can access the things which kind of bring us together. We can access that we have similar fears. Perhaps we are going through the similar challenges. And this type of leadership is really crucial to create a sense of belonging in the team. And this leadership is called resonant leadership. In resonant leadership, leader is trusting the team members. And that brings trust of team members in a leader. Trust to bring safety, trust to bring some sort of certainty, and trust to actually to create the good performance in the team, even when things are uncertain. Now think of a person who brought the worst in you, who actually made you doubt yourself, around whom you didn't really feel like you could be yourself, and around whom you couldn't perform very well either. Now close your eyes and try to imagine that person as vividly as you can. It could be somebody you maybe encountered recently, maybe in your professional work, or it could be in the personal relationships as well. Sometimes we can find those people in our family members, in certain friendships, or just people we kind of had to deal with. Strangely, a lot of people in my seminars before could come up with that person a lot quicker than the person we discussed during the resonant leadership. Now, what qualities did this person possess? So first of all, especially when we talk about leaders, official leaders at work, often this person was really, really focused on the task and really focused on performance. In fact, for that leader, so-called dissonant leader, individuals are like brains on the stick to perform the task, and people can feel quite replaceable because they kind of feel that they only matter to create the performance for the specific task. These leaders give impression that they only care about achievements, and as a result, they kind of have special agenda for the team, a special agenda for the individuals. And the agenda is usually not coming from the team, is usually coming from the leader. It's top-down agenda. They can be quite authoritative and micromanaging. And that brings a lot of stress, both in the team and in the leader, because in order to kind of hold together team's performance in that way is really stressful, because there is a lot of factors we can't control in the team or in the environment. And being a dissonant leader is very, very actually stressful experience, not only for the team, but for the leader as well. And that often leads to the mental fatigue of the leader and of the team members. And often dissonant leaders experience burnout as a result of it. Now, when we actually compare those two different leadership styles, it could look very similar to this image you can see on the screen now, with resonant leadership being on the right-hand side, when the leader is a part of a team, is kind of helping to pull the burden and being creating sense of belonging, purpose, and journey together. Now, with dissonant leader, unfortunately, the experience is quite different. Dissonant leader is making the team sweat, is making the team work really, really hard. And it doesn't create the same sense of belonging. It doesn't create the same sense of actually we're at the same level. And sometimes leader to the team members might feel like it's being actually a burden on the team rather than aiding the team's performance. Now, what you can see in that image, we can see it's actually the same person on the right and on the left. And the reason being that every single one of us can actually be either resonant or dissonant in different situations. So we are all capable of those two different leadership styles. And if I asked you now for a moment to really think, in the recent days, when did you exhibit resonant leadership with people you encountered? It could be your team members or family members. Have a think, what were the situations when you were really quite bossy and micromanaging and want things done in a specific way at a specific time? And also, think about situations when you actually might have been a resonant with people you encountered last few days and people you worked with maybe last week, let's imagine. And when you've been actually bringing the best in other people, when you thought you really took that person's agenda, emotions, and needs into account. Try to find some situations. I'm pretty sure every single one of you who are listening could find some examples. And we'll discuss later, perhaps, why we fall in one style of leadership or another. What are the factors influencing that? Now let's look what happens in the brains of leaders under different styles of leadership, and also what happened in our brains when we were leading in one style or another. So first of all, in order to go through that, I need to give you a little kind of introduction to the human brain. As you can see on the left-hand side, human brain is quite ugly. Fixed brain means it is no longer alive. It's been taken out of, unfortunately, that body and being put in so-called fixative to preserve the structure. The structure looks very similar to my rubber brain model I usually keep on my desk and carry in my backpack where I go as well. And how your brain right now looks much nicer. Actually, looks like this brain on the right-hand side. It's pink. It has lots of blood coming into all of the different areas. And the blood is rich in oxygen and nutrients to feed those brain structures. The reason I like showing the slide when I talk about the brain is that the quality of your functioning of different brain areas depends on the quality of the blood arriving to those areas. So your brain is very thirsty of oxygen and of nutrients such as glucose or the micro elements we get with food. So in that sense, brain is very mechanical. It needs nutrients to make it work, and it needs oxygen to make it work. Now, brain consists of many different parts, and those parts are responsible for different functions. Now, we can actually make our life a little bit simpler by grouping those different areas into three major groups. So first one is lizard brain, the second mammal brain, and the third human brain. So this is so-called the Triune brain model, and it's been created based on comparison of human brain to the brains of different animals. And evolutionary, the oldest areas are at the bottom of the brain in the lizard brain complex. And as the name implies, reptiles such as lizards have very, very similar structures of the brain. Now, mammal brain centers are in the middle. They are much newer than the lizard brain, but still they are quite archaic. They're quite old, and we can find very similar structures in the animals such as cows, dogs, cats, rats. The newest addition to the brain is called the human brain, or the neocortex. Now, confusing bit is that it's not exclusive for humans. In fact, mammals have thin layer of the so-called human brain or neocortex, but that layer is nowhere near as complex as in us, as in humans. Now, how do those different brain areas function, and what are they responsible for? First of all, lizard brain is crucial for keeping you alive. It controls your breathing, heartbeat, and digestion, and makes sure that there is enough energy delivered to all of your organs. So it's crucial for our survival. Mammal brain wants you to feel to be safe, and mammal brain was really crucial structure for us surviving in evolution when we lived in hunter-gatherer times. Whenever mammal brain, looking at the environment both outside and inside of your mind, whenever it detects any potential danger, whether you see something outside that could be dangerous, or whether you imagine something that could be dangerous, mammal brain communicates to you the danger in the language of emotions. And that gives us information, what things we need to try to avoid. Mammal brain is also crucial to maintain the connection, emotional connection between people, and to remember things, both emotional type of things, but also to develop kind of automatic habits. Mammal brain is mainly interested in your own survival and meeting your own needs. It doesn't really care about making other people happy and improving the performance of other people. Now, in order to care about others and to understand other people's way of thinking, we need to activate so-called neocortex, or human brain. That's the only brain structure of our brains that allows us to change. It's crucial for higher cognitive functions, such as planning, prioritizing, rationalizing, learning new information, making sound rational decisions, being creative, collaborating in the team, being empathic, and understanding other people. So all those kind of higher functions, which are crucial for both our own performance at work and also performance in the team and performance as a leader, actually originate in neocortex. Now, neocortex is quite complex, actually. It has a lot of different parts of it as well. So it's, in fact, those different parts enable us to perform different aspects of that performance individually and as a team. So right now, for me to speak, I'm activating this area, speeches area in the frontal lobes of neocortex. For you right now, if you're taking notes or fidgeting in the chair, you're using the motor cortex of neocortex as well. If you're kind of in physical pain, maybe somebody is, hurt their toe or have belly cramps, or to feel the temperature, you're activating some of the sensory cortex with the neocortex. When I'm drinking my lemon juice with water between my intervals when I'm speaking, in order to sense taste, I'm activating this part of neocortex, and in order to understand what that taste is. For you to comprehend the language, to understand what I'm talking right now, you're using this part of the brain within parietal lobe. To read the slides, to understand the numbers of the slides, you still need different parts of the parietal lobes to actually see what's on the slides, be able to have vision, you use the area at the very back of your brain called occipital lobes. To hear what I'm saying, you're using temporal lobes just on the sides of the brains. And to understand the language, to process the language, you use both kind of parietal and temporal lobes. So as you can see, just doing simple things such as for me to talk right now and for you to listen what I'm saying and understand the simple language, we activate the entire brain, the entire part of neocortex. So it's quite an energy consuming process, communicating and learning new information. However, the most energy consuming and the most complex part of that process happens in the structure called prefrontal cortex. So it's a part of frontal lobes, but it's at the very, very front of the frontal cortex, just there at the very, very beginning of the brain, at this part of the brain. Hence the name prefrontal cortex, or PFC for short. So in fact, this part of the brain is actually the smartest part of your entire brain. Prefrontal cortex enable you to understand rational information, to plan your day, to make decisions, to critically evaluate the facts, and to solve any problems you have. Also, prefrontal cortex is crucial for your personality, for your sense of self, for your individuality, because every single one of us is very different, has a very different value hierarchy. We care about different things, with some similarity, of course. Also, prefrontal cortex enable us to control our actions and to have so-called willpower. Prefrontal cortex is crucial for motivation as well. So as you can see, a lot of things what we define as human performance and team performance and leadership performance originate in prefrontal cortex. Now, if we go to other centers, they're also important in us being who we are. And within the limbic system, there is a tiny structure. In this picture shown in green, just here, is the shape of almond, hence called amygdala. And amygdala, although very small, is very powerful in its activity in the brain. Amygdala is the part of mammal brain which is constantly screening the environment for any potential danger. And if it detects any danger whatsoever, it creates the emotions we really dislike, such as anxiety, fear, anger, stress. And it changes the way our body and brain functions when those emotions are being activated. Also, amygdala is to blame if we have any emotionally driven memories, such as past hurts, or the kind of fear created by the memories of the past events. And whenever amygdala is really strongly activated, it can suppress our prefrontal cortex. Amygdala and prefrontal cortex, they're quite near to each other. So if this is amygdala in red, prefrontal cortex is here in that part, and the amygdala is connected to so-called ventromedial prefrontal cortex, part of prefrontal cortex. So amygdala can actually quite powerfully suppress our rational brain, and that process is called amygdala hijack, which we'll discuss about in a minute. Now, if we visit the lizard brain, just to give an example of a brain structure within the lizard brain, is the structure called brainstem, and here is this part, which connects basically our brain to our spinal cord. So brainstem does the job automatically without us even needing to think about it. So it digests the food you've eaten, it makes sure your heart is beating, and it makes sure your lungs do what they need to do. Also, brainstem is crucial for sending the motor signals to your muscles and sensory signals from your body into your brain. So brainstem is kind of automatic structure which enable us to survive and to make sure the body gets everything that it needs. Now, different parts of the brain consume different amounts of energy. And brainstem and the rest of the lizard brain structures, they're really, really efficient. They're like a little Vespa, as in this picture, doing all those automatic tasks to keep us alive. It's you can stay active all the time, day and night, and it requires small energy consumption. Your brain, in other words, always finds energy for it. Mammal brain is like a car, like Audi TT in this example. It's active most of the time, especially when we are awake. And it allows us to be on autopilot. It's so-called subconscious brain centers. We need to use it when we are feeling certain emotions, when we're getting about our day, doing automatic habits, such as, your morning routine, what things you naturally do in the morning when you wake up, and also to use the skills we have, such as talking, writing, cycling, driving a car, cooking a meal. There's automatic things we don't really need to really actively think about step by step when we're doing it. And the reason we can do it is because mammal brain has overtaken those processes and created automatic habits out of it. And it needs medium amounts of energy. So what it means, it actually needs more than the lizard brain, but nowhere near as much as the human brain needs. So human brain, in particular prefrontal cortex, is active when we make decisions, when we try to change our habits, when we're learning new information, and when we are suppressing our emotions. And it's extremely, extremely, extremely expensive for the brain energy-wise. So hence a plane as a metaphor for it. It needs ridiculous amounts of energy. So it's active only and only when we do those processes and when we have enough energy. So what happens if we are tired, or if we are stressed, or if we are scared? Your body finds always the energy to feed the lizard brain, and lizard brain, controls all the rest of your body. Now, it finds, most of the time, it finds energy to feed your mammal brain. But when we're in that kind of stressed or exhausted state, there isn't enough energy to keep your prefrontal cortex dominant thinking going. There is not enough energy to rationally assess the information. There is not enough energy to make sound judgments. And there isn't enough energy to truly care about other people and to understand the states of other people. So we kind of revert to mammal brain dominant thinking, which is based on really automatic habits. And the reason being that it's less costly for the brain. It requires much, much less energy, and it's much quicker as well. And in that state, our thinking changes completely from prefrontal cortex dominant thinking to the amygdala brain dominant thinking. And let me go through those two different kinds of thinking in comparison, because every single one of us can activate both, given the different states we're at. So when we are tired and stressed, every single one of us needs safety. We become narrow-minded to create that kind of really binary safety. Things are either good or bad. The dangers are either completely absent or huge. We often actually also get into the delusional thinking when we are in amygdala dominant thinking. We become very much self-centered and very fearful. We get stuck in our own world, and we can't truly understand another person. Just physically, we're not capable of understanding and empathy. We become very judgmental. Our brain naturally is trying to find whom to blame. And we become kind of right or wrong type of thinking people. We become really binary. Either this action is brilliant or is actually horrible. So we don't have that kind of in between type of thinking when we're in amygdala dominant state. Amygdala distorts the reality because amygdala's job is not to create the reality as it is. Amygdala's job is to keep you safe, to keep you away from dangers. And as a result, it boosts the negative factors in your life. It makes them much, much larger than they truly are. And it ignores the positivity in your life. So amygdala only shows us the danger. And the reason being, amygdala, in evolutionary sense, developed that way because it was crucial for us to survive in hunter-gatherer times. Because if amygdala was kind of just, being passive when there was potential dangers out there, we were much more likely to die if the predator got us. And if amygdala was hypervigilant, we are much more likely to notice it early on and to escape it. Hence, most of us have quite a neurotic brain, and that's how the brain just was developed due to the survival needs. However, it can actually nowadays, it can hinder our performance, and it can result in conflict, negative mind chatter, and in general, it can actually hinder our well-being. Now, how does the prefrontal cortex dominant thinking look like? Prefrontal cortex is the only brain structure that enable you to really understand how things truly are. It can provide us the objective sense of reality, since it seeks to understand the truth. It's open-minded and calm. It can empathize with other people. It can accept the differences between other people, so it can accept the team for who they are. It doesn't feel threatened if people are better or if people are less competent. It just accepts people for who they are and wants to help them to be their best self. Also, when we're in the prefrontal cortex dominant thinking, we're willing to learn and we're willing to understand what is it that we actually need to improve. In prefrontal cortex dominant thinking, we are not defensive. We're willing to become our best selves. And that leads to a very authentic way of being. Every single one of us in that state, we're true to ourselves. We're true to who we truly are. And that results in growth, understanding other people, and also being understood by other people, because we express ourselves in much more empowering ways. And it leads also to the peace of mind. Of course, things are not as simple as just prefrontal cortex dominant thinking and amygdala dominant thinking. That's just one part of the game. So in order to be really empowering leaders, we need to try to activate prefrontal cortex as much as possible. And one part of it, as I mentioned before, was managing energy levels and managing stress levels. In addition to that, we also need to train specific brain networks. Now, what are the brain networks? So before we jump into them, I need to tell you about the neurons. So the neurons are the cells of the brain. And all of those brain areas, which I told you about just a little while ago, contains enormous amount of neurons. It's about 86 billion estimated of neurons within the human brain. And those neurons, they contain the information, any kind of information about your emotions, about your thoughts, about your dreams, about the states of the body. And all of those different structures of the brain we discussed, such as prefrontal cortex, amygdala, brainstem, the neurons in those structures communicate with one another via small electrical currents called nerve impulses, and also chemical signals called neurotransmitters. And those electrical impulses travel through the connections between the neurons called neural networks. And neural networks are basically the connections within the same structure of the brain and across different structures. So in this picture here, you can see one neural network depicted in blue, which enable us to see the slides and to think what the slides contains. So we can call that, for example, understanding the lecture slides, a neural network. If you were cycling outside or writing right now, for example, you would activate this network in yellow, which enable you to activate the muscles of your hands and to feel the pen, or the same activate the muscles of your legs and to feel and balance while you're cycling. Now, to understand the auditory information, you're activating this red network. We can call it understanding language network, where you basically activate the centers which enable you to hear what's being said. And also using prefrontal cortex, you're thinking about what's being said. So in other words, in the brain, everything is connected to everything. And that's what enables us to integrate all the information, to understand the information, and to make things happen. So each thought, each action, each skill is being created by the activation of those really, really specific brain networks, or the groups of networks. Sometimes we need thousands of networks to do one specific task. Now, what different networks are activated by different tasks. So I'll tell you about two main networks which are really crucial in understanding the leadership and which leadership is more empowering. So first group is so-called default mode network. Default mode network is activated when we are in social situation. And when we actually focused on doing well-defined analytical or mechanical tasks, we activated so-called task positive network. Now, let me tell you a little bit more about those networks. So here in orange is different brain centers which belong to default mode network. We activate them when we are in social situation. If you're talking on the telephone with somebody, or if you are communicating with your colleagues, you're activating default mode network. We're using this network when we're thinking about our past, we're imagining the future we want for ourselves. It's autobiographical recall, also imagining autobiographical imagination, imagining future events, especially if you're thinking, where would I like to be in 5 years? What would I like to do in 5 or 10 years from now? So these networks also enable us to understand our own emotions and to control our own emotions, also called emotional regulation, but also to understand the emotions of other people. And you can see here it's the part for so-called mentalizing or theory of mind, understanding what other people are going through, how they are experiencing the situation, and what is it that they need, especially if those people are different kind of personalities to who you are. Also, to have a moral judgment of situation, we need a default mode network to make sound judgment, to make sure that situation is fair for everyone involved. So default mode network is primarily activated by resonant leaders. So when we were imagining those resonant leaders, or when we were actually remembering when we have been resonant leaders ourselves, we needed to activate default mode network in order to be resonant. All of these brain areas are required for each of us to be resonant leader. Now, during the dissonant leadership, we activate so-called task positive network. And task positive network here is depicted in blue, is a very important network. It's crucial network for us to get things done because it activates the areas responsible for so-called working memory, problem solving, focused attention, movements of the eyes, and kind of, quickly scanning through the page. And this is anterior cingulate cortex here is a little bit cut off. So this area is for cognitive effort, putting effort in getting things done, even if it's hard. willpower. So this network is crucial for analytical tasks, for execution of really well-defined, clear tasks. So for example, when I was preparing the slides for this lecture, I needed to use this network. I couldn't have done it with default mode network. Focused attention, especially if if there is any distractions, to get rid of distractions and still stay focused on the task. So right now, if somebody's trying to distract you and bring you a cup of tea, for example, you can still pay attention to the lecture using this task positive network. To remember information which you need, in other words, working memory, you need task positive network as well. Language to communicate what we mean will require task positive network, especially if we kind of have in mind that we have to convey specific message. We need task positive network. Now, when we are just kind of having social banter, default mode network is sufficient for that. Understanding language as well, actually, task positive network is crucial. Logical and causal reasoning originate from task positive network as well. Problem solving, analyzing situation, trying to find the solutions requires task positive network. Planning and strategically thinking about what actions would yield the best outcomes also require task positive network. So this network is very important as well in order for us to get things done. Now, the issue with dissonant leadership is that dissonant leaders get stuck in using that network for social situations as well, not only for getting things done. So those two different networks in the brain evolved to achieve different outcomes, with default mode network being crucial for social connectivity, for empowering the team and empowering the people, and default mode network for getting things done and to strategically plan and analyze situation. Now, very interestingly, this is really quite complex looking figure, but it's telling really crucial information. Here in blue are the centers which are responsible for task positive network, and in red they are brain areas which belong to default mode network. And what this figure is saying, they just plotted together, so saying that there are different centers for default mode network and different centers for task positive network. They don't really quite overlap that much. But more importantly, those different centers are activated at different times. So when those areas in blue, we don't really need to care about the exact names of them, but these are just 3 examples on the left-hand side. So these 3 specific areas of task positive network here in A, B, and C. When the area in blue was active, which is kind of depicted by this hill of activity, during when we were doing mechanical tasks or getting things done, this area was active. But when we were socializing and engaging in the social conversation, the area was absolutely deactivated, and hence the ditch like that rather than the hill. So what that means that social situations inhibit our ability to think really rationally and logically. And the opposite is true. When we are the areas which are activated, when we socialize, here in red in this picture, D, E, F, so this area D, this area E, and this area F, the crucial areas for default modes network. When we're socializing, they're active, hence the hill here of activity for each of them. But when we're doing an analytical task, which is in blue here, they are completely deactivated. They're switched off. So what that means that actually those 2 networks suppress each other. So we're not physically capable to be resonant and dissonant at the same time. We can't be task focused and resonant at the same time. That's just not physically possible. Those 2 networks inhibit each other, suppress each other. However, good news, is that we all can activate both networks, but at different times. We can activate the default mode network at one period of time and task positive network at another period of time. And even further, we activate them multiple times, even in a minute. We kind of keep spontaneously switching between default mode network and task positive network all the time. We go between one and another in less than a minute. Now, which style of leadership we tend to use depends on which network we trained more frequently, which network became stronger. And although we're all capable to switch between those two networks, people who kind of are switching into the resonant mode more frequently are much better at switching between those two different tasks. Let me tell you the mechanism of that. So those, coming back to the brain networks, the networks which we have been using most frequently become so-called brain highways. Brain highways are just really, really strong networks, which we trained over and over and over during our working time. And those networks became so strong that information traveled through those networks really, really quickly and effortlessly. And that saves energy and saves time. So these networks define our default actions and default thoughts and default emotional well-being and personality. In other words, if you have been really using default mode network all the time, you naturally will fall into that default mode network driven resonant leadership in the social setting. But if you actually have been using task positive network to do really well defined analytical tasks all the time, it's very hard to switch back to the resonant leadership when it's needed, because it requires different network. However, we can train things to be different because our brains are plastic. For every single one of us, the networks we just don't use as frequently become weaker and weaker over time. And the neurons which we don't really use, they die off, and that's called apoptosis. The networks we use more and more over time, they become stronger, and that's called activity-dependent potentiation. But also we can activate new networks, and we can create completely new networks, and even we can create new neurons, which is called neurogenesis. When we learn new skills, when we encounter new information, and when we try to learn different leadership approaches as well. So there is hope. So we can train our default mode network and task positive network to be more effective. So the more we use dissonant leadership, the stronger task positive networks become. And for some people who kind of get carried away with default mode network, sometimes getting things done is the hard bit, because the task positive network is not as well trained. So they might need to actually train the task positive network to become stronger, so they can focus on the task for longer and get things done. Now, many other people, they need to practice their resonant leadership to make the default mode networks stronger and stronger over time, so that can become more effortless and easier. We can all train those both networks, and we can train switching between those two networks where it's more appropriate. And that's the most important bit about leadership, is to understand and to activate the relevant style when it's the most appropriate. Because we all can activate default mode network, we all can activate task positive network, but activating each of those when it's the most appropriate, that's a harder bit. Now, what happens in the brains of the team members when the leaders are being dissonant or resonant? And which of those leadership styles is the more appropriate style for these times of uncertainty we are going through now? So in order to answer that, let me invite you to think again about the person who was the dissonant leader in your life. And I'll give you 30 seconds to close your eyes. I'll time it. Just close your eyes and think for 30 seconds about the resonant leader you encountered in your life. And just close your eyes and try to remember experience of being with that person. Try to remember what did it feel like? How did it feel in your body, in your mind? Try to think about it as vividly as you can. Breathe in and just hold that experience. How did you feel being around that person? And time is up. So how did it actually feel? And when I asked that question in the group, if I was to ask now, when you're doing that, most of you will probably say I felt peace. I felt happy. I felt inspired. I felt calm. Why is that? Well, resonant leadership activates in us so-called parasympathetic nervous system. Parasympathetic nervous system is also called rest and digest or replenishment system. So there is quite a few interesting changes in brain chemistry taking place during parasympathetic nervous system. First of all, in the reward centers of our brain, or also called pleasure centers, we get dopamine. And dopamine is a natural motivation molecule in our brains. It enables us to stay on the task. It enables us to feel pleasant and to feel happy about what we're doing and to have good levels of motivation to accomplish the task. But also, we secrete the other molecule called oxytocin. Now, oxytocin creates emotional attachment, connection, trust, and compassion. This is a crucial molecule to feel connected with another person, to feel warm feelings. And oxytocin, by the way, is the natural molecule secreted when parents hold their children, when they hold their babies, especially newborn babies. The oxytocin creates that bond, creates that level of attachment. But oxytocin is also secreted during resonant leadership or resonant friendships with other people or family members. When oxytocin is secreted in the brain, not only we feel relaxed and calm, but also it changes our blood vessels of the brain. It makes them more dilated, so more oxygen and glucose can travel to your prefrontal cortex. And as a result, we can think better. We have sharper minds under that state. We can be more ourselves. It brings the natural authenticity in us. And also, it creates better resilience to stress. There is quite a lot of studies done in animals and brain slices showing that actually oxytocin negates the negative effects of stress in the brain. Stress naturally reduces the neuroplasticity of the brain. And if we have good levels of oxytocin, that kind of replenishes our brain in a way that it recovers the neuroplasticity. So it almost counterbalances the negative effects of stress. Now, different task is to think about the dissonant leader you encountered for the same amount of time. And let's see what happens in our brains when we think about the dissonant leader. Okay, if you close your eyes now and think of that person who was micromanaging, quite self-centered, authoritative, who was dissonant, who kind of was bossy, who wanted things done the way he or she wanted things done, who didn't care about what you truly wanted, who didn't think about how you were feeling. In fact, they weren't probably even capable to think about it at that given moment in time. Try to imagine as vividly as you can. And try to sense in your body, how did it feel like? How did it feel like being around that person? What emotions did that bring in you? How do you feel thinking about it now? Okay, time is up. Now, how did it really feel? And when I ask that in the seminars, people often say, it felt really stressful. I felt anxious. I felt stressed out thinking about that person. And I wanted to stop the exercise as soon as possible. And also, the time seems to stretch so long that 30 seconds seem to feel much, much longer than 30 seconds when thinking about that person, as opposed to when thinking about resonant leader. And the reason being that when we think about those leaders or when we are around them, it activates so-called sympathetic nervous system in our brain, which is opposite to parasympathetic nervous system. It's a stress or fight and flight response in the brain. And the molecules which create that response are adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol. Adrenaline and noradrenaline are almost identical molecules, just adrenaline is in the body and noradrenaline is in the brain. But they both do similar thing. They both change the dilation of blood vessels. So noradrenaline makes the blood vessels in the brain contracted, so there is less oxygen and less glucose delivered to your neocortex. And as a result, naturally, we get back into the amygdala dominant thinking rather than prefrontal cortex dominant thinking. So we get, in that state, the energy is being prioritized for your muscles. So muscles start to contract and they start to feel tight. And we kind of it's almost preparing your body for either punching somebody or running away. And in that state, it's just not possible to truly care about the other person. It's just not possible to be empathic. It's not possible to be resonant. It blocks creativity, it blocks performance, it blocks also the functioning of the immune system and the brain plasticity. So as you can see, the effects of both leaderships on the brain chemistry are quite severe. In addition to that, when we were thinking about resonant leaders, if I could scan your brain at a given time when you were just imagining, you yourself activated the default mode network in your brain. And when you were thinking, which is in orange here in the picture, when you were thinking about dissonant leader, you activated the blue network in this picture, so-called task positive network in your own brain. So resonant leaders make other people more resonant, more capable to connect with other people and be there for other people. And task positive network is activated when we think about dissonant leaders or when we are around them. And it makes us more analytical, more task focused, but more secluded and closed off from other people, and more stressed out and more stressing to other people as well. So what else, looking from brain scans, what else can we tell about the influence of resonant and dissonant leaders? Not surprisingly, when we thought about resonant leaders, the regions in the brain which were activated were associated with positive emotions versus negative emotions for thinking about dissonant leaders. So we just feel better under resonant leadership rather than dissonant leadership. Also, the studies been done by the same Richard Boyatzis, which I keep showing the reference in previous slides. People were much more likely to agree with statements by resonant leaders rather than dissonant leaders. And they also were much more likely to do the tasks which resonant leaders encourage them to do. And they wanted to avoid doing the tasks which dissonant leaders were encouraging them to do. So we're just more likely to kind of go along with the agenda of resonant leaders rather than dissonant leaders. Moreover, resonant leaders are more contagious in terms of the emotions and actions. And in order to understand that, just let me briefly mention about mirror neuron system of the brain. So mirror neuron system was discovered in monkeys when the motor action was studied in them. They were picking up the peanuts and putting them in the cup. In this picture is banana, but it was peanuts in the original experiments. And neuroscientists in Italy were measuring the activity of the motor cortex of their brains. Now, to everyone's surprise, the monkey, the same in the monkey, the same neurons sometimes were active when the monkey picked up the peanuts and when the experimenter picked up the peanut. So what that means that actually there is a separate system in the brain of monkeys and of humans now we know as well, which enable us to copy the actions. And when we watch somebody do an action, it almost creates the same sensation in our brain if I was doing it. If I see somebody playing tennis, in my brain, the tennis playing neurons are also activated. So in fact, just watching somebody doing something, it makes us somewhat better in terms of brain activity, not of muscle activity, but brain activity in doing that action. Just imagining yourself doing an action also activates mirror neuron system and help us get better in terms of brain activity in doing that action. And that's why a lot of professional athletes, such as Michael Phelps, swimmer, they spend a lot of time visualizing and imagining the actions before the really important race. But the same actually happens with emotions. So mirror neuron system is not only responsible for copying the actions or our actions being contagious, but also of our emotions being contagious. And both positive and negative emotions are contagious. Even if we try to suppress them and we try not to show them to others, they're extremely contagious. If emotions are overt, such as fear, anxiety, and anger or happiness, that's even more contagious, of course, needless to say. And those effects are subconscious. We can't quite suppress it. It spreads from person to person when we are spending time with each other. And actions of resonant leaders are more contagious than of dissonant leaders, because the resonant leaders activate mirror neuron system, MNS, more strongly than dissonant leaders. Dissonant leaders, in fact, can sometimes deactivate. We almost kind of block the activity which is exhibited by the dissonant leaders. So which leadership is more effective and which leadership we need for these times we're going through nowadays? So let me firstly show you just a couple studies which basically showed that in most of the instances, resonant leadership was more effective since it created a sense of belonging, purpose, shared vision, safety, performance, increased job satisfaction, and engagement. So needless to say, that brings the best in people. However, in the quite an old study, 1965 study with the programmers, it was shown that actually dissonant leadership was better when people were actually focusing on code. When they're actually focusing on the task, trying to get things done, dissonant leadership helped them to get the task done with less mistakes. And resonant leadership just distracted them, and people did more mistakes because they needed to constantly switch between task positive network and default mode network. Now, when they needed, the programmers needed to work in the group, to collaborate, to brainstorm together, resonant leadership was needed. Dissonant leadership sometimes is also needed when the company is going under crisis, or when the people are really freaking out and they really don't know what to do, when they're really in amygdala dominant state. So in some instances, dissonant leadership, where leader says, you know what, I'm going to tell you exactly what to do, just trust me, we'll be all right, and just guides people through specific actions in the micromanaging way, in a way, and it's authoritative and top-down driven agenda. Sometimes is needed under certain crisis. Now, when we discuss about the times we are going through now, we can tell that both things are needed. So we need resonant leadership to feel safe, to feel sense of belonging, to get to trust that everything is going to be okay. and also to be able to adjust, to change, and to calm our amygdala, to soothe our mammal brain driven fear driven thinking. But also sometimes dissonant leadership is crucial for us to focus on the task, to get things done, and not to get distracted and carried away with our emotional responses. So a combination of both is needed. Now, how common in general is resonant and dissonant leadership? And I share with you just one study as an example from 2008 of managers from consulting firm, where it's been assessed how common dissonant leadership was and how common resonant leadership was. And they found that actually 46% were highly dissonant, 19% were highly resonant, 6% they were good at both. They knew when to switch to which leadership style. And the third of them, 29%, were ineffective in both. And that's where the problems happen when leaders, they kind of don't adjust the leadership style to what's required. Only 6% could adjust and decide which leadership was needed for the given situation. The majority were dissonant or ineffective at either leadership styles. So what is the reason why, if the resonant leadership is crucial for team performance, for helping people to manage their stress response, how come the dissonant leadership is so common? The answer to that is quite simple, but solution is unfortunately not as easy. And that's a stress. Whenever we are stressed, every single one of us becomes dissonant. When we experience fear, anxiety, uncertainty, all these emotions amygdala create, every single one of us become closed off, amygdala dominant thinkers, and it creates dissonant leadership style, even when it's not effective, even if we know that our team or partners need resonant leadership now. We become dissonant. That becomes it creates a feeling of crisis and urgency. It creates more stress and spreads the stress in the team. And it impairs the performance of leaders and of the team members. It also breeds the poor understanding of others and poor understanding of yourself, closed-minded thinking, lack of creativity, lack of empathy, lack of communication within the team. And that can easily result in the burnout within the team and within the leader as well. So what can we do to actually really address that? What can we do to not allow that to happen? And the answer is we need to practice stress reduction activities every single day, all of us, team members and leaders in particular. What activities could help us to reduce our stress? What activities are there that could help to create more safety? First of all, we need to take regular breaks, quality breaks. What are the quality breaks? Physical exercise. If I may share with you, one of my favorite type of break is doing push-ups or doing star jumps. Given the lockdown condition, I cannot go for a run. So I usually just open the bifold doors into the garden here. And I just do a few star jumps. I do push-ups. Every day I increase my number of push-ups just by one to make it really manageable and easy. In terms of physical exercise, it's quite important that it's achievable. Small and frequent is more beneficial than really extensive physical exercise infrequently. How regular breaks should be? It depends on the time of the day. It depends on the state you are at. So when we just start working day, and if we're in pretty good state, we can go for an hour and a half without a break. But then I would suggest to take 15 to half an hour break. But if we start feeling mental fatigue, stress, fear, I would suggest taking a 15-minute break every 45 minutes. So basically taking each hour, working for 45 minutes, just focusing on the task, and then doing for 15 minutes, doing breathing exercises, physical exercise, meditating. Another thing that can help to reduce stress is breaking tasks into manageable and achievable goals. So also taking the timeline, setting out the timeline. What is it that I'm trying to achieve within the next number of weeks, number of days? I yesterday morning I sat down and planned my, a lockdown plan for 12 weeks. I wrote down what specifically I want to achieve in multiple areas of my life each week. And when I break things down that way, so for example, I'm currently working on the book. I got book deal just before the coronavirus lockdown. And when thinking about writing a book, it's a big undertaking. But when I sat down and actually really written down how much do I need to get done each week and then each day, it feels much more achievable. And it has to be achievable, especially when we experience lots of stress and uncertainty. We have to break the tasks in really, really small, achievable goals. Also, another thing that can help actually to reduce stress is thinking of one task at a time. So I start the day asking myself, what is number one thing I need to get done today? And only when I achieve that top priority, I go down the list and think, what is second most important thing I need to achieve today? When I achieve that, I ask myself, what is the third most important thing I need to achieve today? Why do I do that? Is because when we have a list, to-do list, that's stress inducing itself. And also your prefrontal cortex keeps trying to prioritize which tasks to do, and that drains the mental energy. Oxytocin-inducing activities can help to reduce stress and also to negate negative effects of stress to brain plasticity. Good oxytocin-inducing activities are, if you have a partner or if you have children, is cuddling. Going and giving a hug to your partner, sitting on the sofa, maybe watching a movie together or just sitting together, holding hands. I have a 2-year-old daughter, so I frequently, take and cuddle her when I feel stressed. Also, watching funny videos on the internet induces oxytocin, especially if they're like kitten or dog or kids funny videos. That induces oxytocin. Laughter, anything that causes you to laugh. There is multiple things that could actually induce happiness and laughter in each of us. Actually, another thing which induces oxytocin is doing acts of kindness to other people. Calling somebody and asking, how are you doing? Writing a letter to thank somebody, or just a short message to check on somebody induces oxytocin. At the end of the day, writing the gratitude list or what went well today list also increases oxytocin and helps naturally to reduce stress. Meditation and mindfulness also naturally help us to kill underlying effects of stress in the brain. And it doesn't have to be long to matter. I do just 7 minutes of meditation in the morning. And that has effects of reducing underlying levels of stress, just chronic generalized stress, which probably most people are experiencing right now. There is different mindfulness practices, and there is some apps you can actually check out, such as Headspace for that. And one more activity is breathing exercise. That's probably one of the quickest ways to reduce stress. And I'll take you through one breathing exercise just in a minute when I finish with the slides. And breathing exercises naturally change the energy distribution in the body and actually pushes us into the parasympathetic nervous system. The other thing is challenging amygdala dominant thinking. If your amygdala is dramatizing, you can challenge that using your prefrontal cortex and again ask, is that true? Can there be any other ways to explain that. And there are some methods out there which can help you to do that. So for example, Byron Katie's Loving What Is book, it addresses that, how to use that method. Using coaching techniques, very much with my clients when I coach them, I use that kind of prefrontal cortex dominant thinking to challenge amygdala dominant thinking and to retrain, almost educate your amygdala to think, to be wiser, and to adjust the sense of danger. Sleep and getting enough rest to recover and replenish is crucial as well. Now for the end, let me take you through this breathing exercise, which would help you to soothe your amygdala and reduce the level of stress in your body and in your brain. So I'll ask you to sit straight up in your chair. Put your hands on your lap and close your eyes. And now breathe in through your nose to the count of 4. And hold to the count of 4. And breathe out to the count of 4. Once again, into the count of 4. Hold to the count of 4. And breathe out to the count of 4. Now, when we are breathing in the third time, imagine it's sunny outside and you're breathing in that sunshine and warmth. You feel your tummy, you feel your chest, you feel your back, you feel how your whole body expands and fills with that sunshine and warmth. And hold it for a little bit. And breathe out slowly and gently. Now imagine you're by the sea. Of course, we can't be there, but imagine you are. Imagine you're by the coast and you can hear the waves crashing into the shore. You can hear the seagulls. And you breathe in that freedom and freshness. You feel your tummy. You feel your chest. Feel how your chest expands. You feel your back stretch up. Feel your whole body of the freedom and freshness. And breathe out slowly and gently. Now imagine it's a winter time. You're sitting by the fireplace. It's cold outside, so you have a blanket around you. And there is a fire crinkling into the fireplace. And you have a hot cup of tea. And you breathe in that warmth and coziness. You feel your tummy. You feel your chest. You feel your back. And hold it for a little bit. And breathe out slowly and gently. Now lastly, imagine there is a candle on the table. And you look at the flame of the candle. And you breathe in that peace and tranquility. You feel your tummy. You feel your chest. You feel your back. And hold it for a little bit. And breathe out slowly and gently. And when you're ready, open your eyes. Move your body a little bit. How does it feel like? Perhaps you feel a little bit more relaxed. Perhaps you feel a little bit more grounded. Some of you might have got stressed just thinking, by the pure fact of thinking that you can't be by the sea. But try doing that next time. Maybe that would work better next time if that was your reaction. And every now and then I get people who get stressed out by the exercise. For majority of people, that has a soothing effect and activates parasympathetic nervous system, calms amygdala, and we can have really good activity in prefrontal cortex as a result of it. And we can be resonant leaders to our team members, family members, and anyone else whom we communicate with as a result of it. So let me summarize the 5 key take-home messages, key points of this lecture. First of all, resonant and dissonant leadership styles change how our brains function. And also, it's activated by very, very different brain networks, which get stronger and stronger given which ones we practice. If we practice resonant leadership, our brain default mode network becomes stronger. As a result, it becomes easier for us being resonant. If we spend most time in dissonant leadership, our task positive network becomes stronger, and that becomes our natural state, even if the resonant leadership would be more effective. Our brains are the smartest, the most capable when we feel well, when we enjoy what we do, when we have resonant relationships with people. And that leadership brings the best in people normally when that is suitable. Also, it brings the sense of belonging, purpose, safety. It induces oxytocin and helps the team members to calm their stress response. Our emotions and actions are contagious, but in particular, emotions and actions of resonant leaders. So resonant leaders have much more influence and can be much more inspiring to their team members, and we can be much more inspiring and help other people step up to being their best self, even if we're not in the specific official leadership position. Stress and fear naturally make us dissonant. Thus, to maintain a connection with other people, to bring the best in other people, and to bring the best in ourselves, we need to regulate stress levels. And we need to help our team members to regulate stress levels. And I shared with you a few methods to do so. I hope the insights from this lecture seminar will help you to get some useful insights of how to go about your day and your working life and your team performance in these times of uncertainty. If you do have any questions I still haven't addressed, these are the ways you can get in touch with me. Probably best and easiest ways to send me an email. Also, you feel free to share, to ask the NABS people to forward your email to me. We are in frequent communication with them. You can also reach me on LinkedIn, or you can tweet about me on Twitter if you want to share any insights from this seminar. I also just started literally this morning creating the community called Empower Your Brain on Facebook. I wanted to call it Empower Your Brain during COVID-19, but for some reason Facebook doesn't allow me to use COVID-19 in the title, so I just called Empower Your Brain. So if you want to join that community, I'll be sharing some videos and tips, and we might do the group coaching sessions on Facebook. I'll share some links there. So feel free to join that community and to like it, and you'll get access to the information there freely at no cost. And if you want to check more about the work I do, about seminars I do, you feel free to visit my website called My Brain During the Day. It's a little bit outdated website. I'll spend some time, once I get a bit more ahead with my book, I'll update my website and put a lot more information there. I do have some lectures on YouTube as well. One of them already been filmed by NABS on emotions, which we done at the Twitter premises. So I would suggest checking that out if you haven't attended that. And I hope you learn something useful. I hope you can find the ways to empower yourself and to be your best self in these times. Because although these are challenging times, but they're also times of opportunity. Times of opportunity to learn to manage ourselves best, to learn to manage and heal our amygdala, heal any traumas we have from our amygdala, which are constantly coming up because there is lots of triggers. And also to learn information which would help you to truly be your best self and to empower your own brain and the brains of your team members. Thank you so much for being here. And I'll send now the video to the NABS team so they could share with you in time. And if I get loads of questions, I might create another video answering the questions as well, which NABS team would share with you. Thank you so much, and I wish you good functioning of prefrontal cortex and courage and resourcefulness to use amygdala soothing techniques to be in your best self state.
Thank you, Dr. Gabija, for sharing your expertise with all of us. Some of the key points I've taken away from today's NABS talk are: resonant and dissonant leadership styles change how the brain of team members function. Our brains are the smartest when we feel well and enjoy what we do and have resonant relationship with the leader and other team members. Our emotions and actions are contagious. We are more influential and inspiring under the resonant leadership, and stress and fear naturally make us dissonant. Therefore, to maintain a connection in the team, it is essential to regulate stress levels of leaders and team members. We'll be emailing you a feedback form after this session, and we'd love for you to take a few minutes to fill out the form and let us know what you thought. We also are all about the community. So if you think there's someone else that would benefit from some of the talks or services that we offer, please do pass that on. That advocacy helps us to help the industry thrive. So thank you for everything you've done, and I hope you've enjoyed the talk.